I cannot stress this enough. You need to be scouring this website day and night. It is updated by the minute.
So, Joe Neal's totally right. When you're a new government contractor, most of your leads are going to come from SAM. But over 700 million in new opportunities come out every day. So I want to share how I create searches that return good leads without burying me or my clients in trash. So to start, we'll go to sam.gov, click on search, and then select contract opportunities. And for learning purposes, why don't we create a search for network cybersecurity services? But we could create a search for construction or transportation or a product. Creating a search in SAM is pretty much the same no matter what you do. So let's put network cybersecurity into the search bar, hit enter, and let's see what we get. And while Sam's loading, a tip. You won't create the perfect search the first time you try, and you don't have to. I've been doing this for a decade, and I'm still testing different keywords and filters, so don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and learn by doing. And our search returned 33 results, so let's take a look at the titles to see what kind of quality we got. And I'm assessing quality on 2 dimensions. The first is whether the search returned everything that I might be interested in, and the second is how many bad results got returned. And my goal is to create a search that returns all the interesting contracts and filters out all the bad results. Now, this is basically impossible, but that's the goal. So looking at these results on the first dimension, I'd guess that we're getting around 70% of all the network cybersecurity contracts out there, which means that our search missed around 30% of the contracts that we'd want to see. And on the second dimension, I'd guess that only 20% of the contracts returned are actually for network cybersecurity services, and the other 60% are kind of all over the map. So that's our baseline. Now let's improve those results. So our first improvement is to refine our keywords. And the goal is to find 1 to 3 keywords that appear in as many good contracts as possible and which appear in as few other contracts as possible. And to figure out which keywords to choose, look at government contracts in your area, do a synonym search, and maybe see how other government contractors talk about their products and services. So for our example, let's say you do your research and you find that 99% of the contracts you care about either have the word cybersecurity or the alternate spelling cyberspace security or the phrase network security in them. Now, some contracts might have all 3, but very few have none. So that's perfect. We're going to use those. And don't worry about how many bad results these keywords return. We'll filter those out later. And if you just want a quick look at what's out there, you don't have to do the research. Just put in the most common words or phrases you can think of, and you can always come back and refine your words later. The next improvement is to add quotation marks. So if you put 2 or more words into quotes, SAM will treat them as if they were a single unit. So a contract would have to have the exact text in the quotes to be returned. Now, be careful with quotation marks. They can filter out good results in unexpected ways. Here's a simple example. Let's say you install solar panels. Well, you might be tempted to put install solar panels in quotation marks. But if you do that, you'll miss out on contracts that ask for installation of solar panels, or solar panel installation, or install and maintain solar panels, which are all contracts you'd probably want to see. But there are 2 times when quotation marks are great. The first is if someone emails me the title of a contract and I want to find it on SAM. Then I'll put the contract title in quotation marks, put that into search, and the SAM record usually pops right up. The second time is when I want to search using a keyword phrase, like network security, because I don't want SAM to return contracts related to networks in general. I only want SAM to return contracts that specifically talk about network security. So for our example, I'm going to add quotes around cybersecurity and network security. So our keywords are now cybersecurity, cyberspace security in quotes, and network security in quotes. Next, let's improve our search by telling SAM how to treat the keywords we entered. And we have 3 options. Any words, which will return any contract that has at least one of our keywords in it. So in our example, SAM would return a contract if cybersecurity or cyberspace security or network security appears in it. Next, we have all words, which will return any contract that has all our keywords in it, but the position of those keywords doesn't matter. So in our example, a contract would have to contain cybersecurity and cyberspace security and network security to be returned. And finally, we have exact phrase, which is basically the same as putting quotation marks around your entire keyword list. So in our example, SAM would only return a contract if it had the exact text cybersecurity, cyberspace security, network security. Now, by default, SAM is set to all words. But in general, I don't like this option because I don't care which spelling of cybersecurity a contract uses or whether a contract uses the word cybersecurity or the term network security. If any of those appear, I want to see it. Instead, I prefer any words because I don't care whether the contract talks about cybersecurity or network security. If any of my keywords are in the contract, I want to know about it. Now, any words can return a lot of bad matches, but we can fix that by adding NAICS and PSC codes, which we'll talk about in a minute. Finally, we can choose exact phrase, and I generally don't recommend it for the same reason that I don't recommend using quotation marks. There are just too many ways to say the same thing, and exact phrase has a tendency to filter out good options. So for now, I'm going to stick with any words. So let's take a look at the results. And assuming we chose good keywords, 99% of the contracts we'd want to see should be in the results. So we're great on dimension 1. But my quick review of the titles makes me think that we have a lot of bad results, which isn't great, but that's relatively easy to solve. Alright, next let's figure out whether to add NAICS and PSC codes. Generally, I try not to use them. Somehow they're simultaneously overbroad and problematically narrow, and I think they're especially hard for new companies to use effectively. Honestly, if you're happy with your keyword results, I'd skip codes altogether. But codes can be helpful when your keyword search is doing a good job returning promising contracts, but it's also returning a ton of results that are way off base, which is the situation in our example. And typically this happens because your keywords are in common government regulations, or your keywords have alternative meanings. For example, let's look at our results. And some of these are really good. So they're actually for cybersecurity services. But look at these contracts. They don't have anything to do with cyber. So let's open one up. And as you can see, the reason why it was returned is because it has cybersecurity regulations written into it. Now, these bad matches are usually easy to spot, but they're really annoying. So if you're getting a lot of bad results, open up the product or service information filters and add your codes. Now, the principal NAICS code for cybersecurity services is 5415. So let's enter that, and as you can see, our results got a lot better, but the number of results went way down. And that's generally good because SAM is filtering out a lot of those way off base contracts. But it's also filtering out good contracts that happen to get a non-5415 NAICS. So if you add codes, a couple of recommendations. First, research your codes and create a comprehensive list of all the codes where your kind of work appears. And for help researching codes, see our conversation here. And don't be surprised if you end up with a dozen codes, some of which can seem pretty far off from the work you do. To illustrate, look at this result. It has the 541611 NAICS, so it's principally a management support services contract. But if we dig into it, there's a ton of cybersecurity work in there, so you'd probably like your search to return this contract. But the only way to do that is to know that cybersecurity sometimes appears in contracts tagged with the 541611 NAICS code, and adding that code to your filters. So to summarize, you basically have 3 options. First is to run your keyword search with no NAICS codes, and the pros are that you won't filter out any good opportunities just because of an unusual NAICS. But you may get overwhelmed by contracts that have your keyword but aren't actually interesting. Option 2 is to research your NAICS codes, then do a keyword search with all the relevant codes. And the pro is that your search won't filter out too many good contracts, and you won't be overwhelmed by bad matches. But the con is that it takes a lot of time to find every relevant NAICS. And option 3 is to run your keyword search with just the most obvious 1 or 2 NAICS codes. And the pro here is that it's easy, and you'll filter out a ton of the bad matches. The con is that you're going to filter out a lot of good contracts that happen to get weird codes. Now, there's no right or wrong answer. But if you're in doubt, I'd go with option 3. Just put in a couple NAICS codes and move on. Sure, you'll miss some good stuff, but it gets you leads fast, and you can always come back and add more codes later. Now, another way to improve your results without a ton of work is to filter based on whether the contract is for R&D, products, or services using the PSC filter. Sorry, that little inside joke. Even though the entire PSC system was designed to differentiate between R&D, products, and services, and you can filter that way in USA spending, you can't in SAM, which is infuriating. And I know we're here to talk about SAM, but please consider using FedScout. They are a sponsor, but their search is better than SAM's, and it's free, and you can do that nifty R&D services or product filtering. It's a genuinely good product. But back to SAM. Next tip, make sure you've written down your codes because SAM's NAICS autocomplete is broken. So you have to type in the actual numbers one at a time. And if you think that's tedious, you're right. It's incredibly tedious. And final tip, like with your keywords, if you use codes, plan on experimenting with different ones to figure out what combination of keywords and codes get you to the right results without too many distractions. And by the way, to help you benchmark your own search results, my target's 20%. So if 20% of my search results are interesting, I'm happy. That doesn't mean I pursue 20% of my search results. My saved searches produce about 500 results a year, but about 100 of those are interesting. So 400 are just way off base. And of those 100, I pursue maybe 10. But I'm glad that I saw those 100 because I like to know what's going on in my industry, and I hate missing things. And I've found that if my good result rate is much higher than 20%, it means that I'm filtering out good results. And if my good result rate is much lower than 20%, I get frustrated by all the trash in my search and I end up missing good opportunities in the debris. And I know this is a lot, but once you've dialed in your keywords and codes, you're basically done. The other filters are easy. Next, let's figure out whether to filter by location, or as it's called here, place of performance. Frequently, the government doesn't care where the work's done. For example, if they're buying software or if they want someone to do R&D, then location doesn't really matter, and the place field will be blank. But if the government's buying services where location does matter, like janitorial or construction, or they want a product delivered to a particular place, then they'll list a place of performance. So if you provide a service that has to be done in person, or if you sell a product and shipping costs are a big part of your total price, you'll want to add a place of performance. So if that's you, add the states where you could reasonably and cost competitively deliver your product and service. But if you're in doubt, I'd leave the location empty because the government is pretty open to remote work. Also, just FYI, if you add anything to the place of performance filter, all of the contracts where the place is blank will get filtered out, which is another good reason to not use this filter. Now, before we get to customer, set aside, and other filters, if this video has been helpful, please hit like and click subscribe. That's how we convince our boss to let us take time away to make these classes and convince FedScout to keep sponsoring them. All right, next let's get rid of zombie contracts. I know this sounds strange, but SAM is full of them. A zombie contract is a contract that's dead, so past its due date, but still in the system walking around aimlessly trying to eat our brains. Or at least drive us crazy by junking up our search results. Let me show you what I mean. So looking at our results, we've got nearly 8,000 of them, which is pretty great. And we've got the active box checked, so all of these must be active, right? Wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Check it out. If we start going back in this list, we can see that a lot of them were released in 2015. And let me assure you, these contracts are no longer live. They were due a long time ago and SAM should have removed them. But getting rid of them is easy. Just go to the response date and set it to due in the next year. And voila, all those zombie contracts go away. Next, we want SAM to only return active acquisitions, not administrative notices that get published in SAM. So under type, select solicitation, combined, sources sought, pre-solicitation, and special notice. Now, some people will tell you that you should only look for pre-solicitations and sources sought because as the saying goes, if you learned about it when the RFP hit SAM, you're already too late to win. Well, honestly, there is some truth to this, but a few things. First, lots of people win contracts they learn about on SAM. Second, if you find out about an opportunity when the RFP hit SAM, you might decide not to pursue it, but you still want to know that it came out. And third, let's say you did respond to the RFI or sources sought. Well, you don't want to miss the RFP because of your search settings. And FYI, special notices are the miscellaneous of SAM record types. So a lot of the time they're nothing burgers, but every so often they have an industry day announcement or something else really helpful. So I recommend leaving them in. But now that we've set our keywords and codes and gotten rid of the zombies and other junk, I think you're done because I advise against using the awardee, customer, or set aside filters. But let's talk through them. So let's start with awardee. And this filter allows you to put in a company name and find contracts that they've won. So it's great if you're doing market research, but not helpful here. So leave it blank. Next, The federal organization filter allows you to filter based on the government agency releasing the contract. And I recommend against using it because as a new vendor, you don't know where you're going to get traction. You might have spent 40 years in the Navy, but you're a business owner now. And if you filter out everything but Navy contracts, you'll miss finding out that the State Department or some other agency is putting out a lot of contracts for your product and service. And finally, I recommend against filtering by set aside. And here's why. First, we've done the math and competition for set aside and non set aside contracts is the same. So set aside contracts aren't easier to win. Second, if a great contract comes out in a set aside you don't have, you should still go after it. A contract outside your set aside is just an opportunity to sub to a company that does have that set aside. Sure, you'll be a subcontractor, but who cares? 49% of a contract is better than 0%. Third, a lot of people prefer set aside contracts because they don't want to compete against large companies. And that's totally reasonable. But I still think you want to know that an interesting but non set aside contract came out, even if you don't pursue it. And that's how to build your first SAM search. I've got a little more time if you want to talk about something else, and if not, good luck and I hope you enjoyed the coffee.